My husband took everything in the divorce. He had no idea what he was really taking, and what happened next still gives me chills when I think about it. I couldn't believe I was standing in that courtroom watching a grown man's hands tremble so badly he could barely hold on to the table. The truth is, some secrets are so powerful, they can destroy an empire in 5 whispered words. Marcus thought he'd backstabbed me perfectly, thought he'd humiliated and shamed me into accepting scraps while he rode off into the sunset with everything we'd built together. But here's what nobody tells you about revenge. Real revenge doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It waits patiently in the shadows until your enemy hangs himself with his own rope. For 15 years, I was the invisible force behind a man who thought he was a king, and when he decided to trade me in for a younger model, he made one catastrophic assumption: that I was too broken, too defeated, too stupid to see what was really happening. The shocking part isn't that he cheated. That's almost boring in its predictability. The shocking part is how eagerly he fought to take everything, how his arrogance blinded him to the cliff he was sprinting toward. I watched my husband lie, watched him manipulate our son, watched him parade his infidelity through our home while his mother packed my life into garbage bags. They mocked me, exposed my pain to our entire community, and assumed I'd just disappear quietly into whatever small existence they decided I deserved. But what they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd been 3 steps ahead for years, protecting what actually mattered while Marcus fought desperately for a ticking time bomb he mistook for treasure. This isn't just a story about betrayal and payback. It's about what happens when someone underestimates the woman they humiliated, when karma gets a little help from careful planning, and when justice is served so perfectly it almost feels like fate. Then everything changed in that courtroom, and the man who'd taken everything realized he'd actually taken nothing but his own destruction. I'm standing in that courtroom, and I can still feel my heart pounding like it's gonna break through my chest. My husband Marcus, well, soon-to-be ex-husband, is sitting there with that smug grin plastered on his face, the same one he's been wearing for months. His lawyer leans in close and whispers something, just 5 words I couldn't hear from where I was sitting. But what happened next? Marcus went pale, like someone had drained every drop of blood from his face. His hands started trembling so badly he had to grip the table, and I watched that arrogance crumble right before my eyes. The truth is, I'm getting ahead of myself here, and I know you're probably thinking, what the hell just happened? Trust me, I couldn't believe it either when it all came together. This moment, this beautiful moment of justice, didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was built on 15 years of betrayal, humiliation, and lies. Marcus thought he had everything figured out, thought he'd backstabbed me perfectly, and I'd just roll over like some defeated puppy. But revenge, real revenge, isn't loud and messy. It's patient, calculated, and oh so satisfying. I need to take you back to the beginning, to show you exactly how a marriage built on my back became the perfect trap for the man who tried to destroy me. See, this wasn't just about payback for the cheating or the way he shamed me in front of everyone we knew. This was about reclaiming my dignity, my self-worth, and protecting the one thing that mattered more than anything: my son. The shocking part isn't just that Marcus fell. It's how eagerly he dove headfirst into his own destruction. So let me rewind this whole mess and walk you through it step by step. Because the devil's in the details. You need to understand who Marcus was, who I was, and how a woman everyone dismissed as just the wife became the architect of the most perfect downfall I could have imagined. Every humiliation, every lie, every moment he lied to my face thinking I was too stupid to notice, it all mattered. And when you hear what those 5 words were, you'll understand why karma isn't just real. Sometimes you get to be the one serving it. I promise you, by the time we get back to that courtroom, you're gonna see this whole family drama in a completely different light. Marcus wanted everything in the divorce. The house, the cars, the business, all of it. What he didn't know was that everything came with a price tag he couldn't even imagine paying. I'm talking about the kind of vengeance that doesn't just hurt. It educates. But first, let me introduce you to the man I thought I married. Back before the betrayal, before the infidelity, before I discovered what he really was. Let me show you how I built an empire. I met Marcus at a coffee shop in downtown Seattle 15 years ago, and honestly, He swept me right off my feet with those big dreams of his. He was charismatic, ambitious, talking about building his own consulting firm from scratch, and I fell hard for that vision. Within a year we were married, and I threw myself into making his dream our reality. I became the backbone of everything he built. I handled the books, landed half the clients through my own network, managed our home, and eventually raised our son Ethan while Marcus played the role of successful businessman to everyone who'd listen. The betrayal didn't start with another woman. It started the first time Marcus introduced me at a company event as just my wife instead of his partner. I remember standing there, shamed and humiliated, while he took credit for a client pitch I'd written word for word. That became the pattern. I'd do the work, he'd take the glory, and I was expected to smile and nod like some decorative piece of furniture. My self-worth got chipped away bit by bit, year after year, until I barely recognized the woman staring back at me in the mirror. I couldn't believe how invisible I'd become in my own life, in the business we built together from absolutely nothing. Marcus would come home and complain about his tough day, while I'd been up since 5 managing spreadsheets, client communications, Ethan's school schedule, and keeping our household running like a well-oiled machine. The dignity I once had, the confidence. It all got buried under this mountain of unrecognition and constant dismissal. He'd roll his eyes when I tried to contribute ideas in meetings, like I was some intern who'd wandered in off the street. But here's what Marcus never understood about payback. It's not always immediate, and it's definitely not always obvious. While he was busy building his ego and his reputation, I was building something else entirely. Knowledge. I knew every contract, every client relationship, every financial detail of that company, because I'd been the one actually running it behind the scenes. The shocking truth was that without me, Marcus's empire was just smoke and mirrors, but he was too arrogant to ever see it. Ethan was 10 when things started really shifting, when Marcus began staying late at the office more often, when the lies became more frequent and sloppier. I'd catch him on his phone at dinner, grinning at messages he'd quickly hide when I walked by. The infidelity signs were all there, practically screaming at me, but I wasn't ready to face them yet. I had this naive hope that maybe I was wrong, that maybe the man I'd sacrificed everything for still had some shred of respect left for our family. Then came the day everything changed. The day Marcus walked into our kitchen with that cold, business-like expression and dropped the bomb that would set this whole story in motion. Marcus didn't even have the decency to sit down when he told me he wanted a divorce. He just stood there by the kitchen island like he was firing an employee. "This isn't working anymore," he said, cold as ice, like our 15 years together was just some failed business venture he needed to cut loose. Then came the real knife to the heart. He wanted the house, both cars, the entire company, and I could keep Ethan, like our son, was some consolation prize he was generously allowing me to have. I couldn't believe the words coming out of his mouth, couldn't process how the man I'd built everything with was now treating me like garbage he needed to dispose of. The betrayal went even deeper when his mother Eleanor showed up the next day, standing in my living room with her arms crossed and that judgmental look she'd perfected over the years. "You should have tried harder to keep him happy," she said, like the infidelity was somehow my fault, like I'd driven Marcus into another woman's arms by not being enough. The humiliation of having my own mother-in-law shame me in my own home, telling me I deserved this, that I should just accept whatever Marcus was willing to give me. It was crushing. Eleanor made it clear whose side she was on, and justice felt like a joke when even family turned against me. Marcus didn't waste any time making this divorce as painful as possible. He hired some shark lawyer and started pushing papers faster than I could breathe. He'd walk through the house like he already owned it alone, making plans for renovations, talking on the phone about his future while I was still living there. The backstabbed feeling was constant, the sensation of being erased from my own life while still physically present in it. He treated me like I was already gone, like I was just this inconvenient obstacle he had to navigate around until the lawyers made it official. What really showed me the depth of his cruelty was how he started acting around Ethan, using our 12-year-old son as another bargaining chip in his twisted game. Marcus would make these big promises to Ethan about their new life together, subtly poisoning my relationship with my own child. The vengeance I started feeling wasn't just about what Marcus did to me anymore. It was about protecting Ethan from becoming collateral damage in his father's selfish destruction. Every lie Marcus told our son, every manipulation, it made my blood boil hotter. I was sleeping in the guest room by week 2, and Marcus had already changed the locks on his home office, cut off my access to the business accounts I'd helped build from zero. The shocking speed of it all left me reeling, trying to find a lawyer, trying to hold myself together for Ethan, trying not to completely fall apart. My so-called friends started avoiding my calls, probably fed some story by Marcus about how I was unstable or difficult, classic moves from the cheater's playbook. I felt so alone, so backed into a corner with nowhere to turn. But then something shifted inside me, something fierce and unbreakable that Eleanor's words had accidentally awakened when she tried to shame me into submission. I remembered my grandmother's voice, the woman who'd raised me to be strong, telling me to always have my own money, my own plan, my own way out. And that's when I realized Marcus wasn't the only one who could play games. He just didn't know I'd been preparing for this possibility longer than he could imagine. 3 weeks into the divorce proceedings, Marcus brought her home. Her name was Sienna, and she was everything designed to humiliate me further. 28 years old, blonde, bubbly, and so obvious it was almost laughable if it wasn't so devastating. He paraded her through our house, my kitchen, introducing her to Ethan like this was all perfectly normal and I was supposed to just smile and accept it. The betrayal of watching this younger woman touch my things, sit in my spot at the dinner table, laugh at Marcus's jokes in my living room. It was psychological warfare, plain and simple. Sienna started showing up everywhere, and Marcus made sure I knew about it. At the office, at Ethan's soccer games, even at the grocery store where I'd shopped for 15 years. The humiliation was intentional and brutal. This public announcement that I'd been replaced by a newer model. I couldn't believe how shameless they were. How Marcus didn't even pretend to have some dignity about the whole thing. My neighbors watched, my friends whispered, and I felt like I was being mocked by my entire community, while Marcus and Sienna played house in what was still technically my home too. Then Marcus started cutting me off financially, piece by piece, turning the screws tighter. My credit card stopped working at the checkout line. Declined, declined, declined. While I stood there mortified with a cart full of groceries and people staring. He'd taken control of everything, freezing accounts, rerouting payments, making sure I felt the full weight of my dependence on him. The revenge he was exacting for what? Existing? For 15 years of building his empire? Every small humiliation was designed to break me down, to make me desperate enough to accept whatever scraps he decided to throw my way. Eleanor made everything worse by showing up with garbage bags, actual black trash bags, to help me pack my things. She went through my closets, my drawers, deciding what I deserved to take and what should stay because Marcus paid for it. I watched this woman who I'd hosted for holidays, who I'd cared for when she was sick, pick through my life like I was nothing. She actually tried to keep my grandmother's recipe box, saying it was too nice for where I'd be living, until I physically grabbed it from her hands. The shamed feeling that washed over me in that moment. I've never felt so small, so powerless. Sienna started rearranging furniture, repainting walls, erasing every trace of me from the home I'd built. She painted over my sage green kitchen, the exact color my grandmother had in her house, my safe space, with some trendy gray that looked cold and lifeless. Marcus just stood there watching, smirking, like he was enjoying every second of my pain. The infidelity wasn't just physical anymore. It was this complete replacement of me in every aspect of the life I'd created. They were building their future on the ashes of everything I'd worked for, and I was expected to just disappear quietly. But what Marcus and Eleanor and Sienna didn't know was that while they were busy humiliating me, I was making calls of my own, meeting with someone who'd change everything. Every trash bag Eleanor packed, every wall Sienna painted, every credit card Marcus canceled. I documented it all, photographed it all, and quietly built my case. Because the truth about karma is that it doesn't always strike like lightning. Sometimes it's patient, methodical, and absolutely devastating when it finally lands. The backstabbed feeling reached a whole new level when I realized my best friend Rachel was feeding information directly to Marcus. I'd confided in her about my lawyer consultations, my fears, my strategy, and suddenly Marcus knew things he shouldn't have known. I caught Rachel leaving his office one afternoon, laughing at something on her phone, and when our eyes met, she looked guilty for just a split second before plastering on that fake smile. The betrayal cut deeper than Marcus's infidelity ever could, because Rachel had been my person, my safe space, the one I thought I could trust when my entire world was crumbling. I couldn't believe someone I'd known for 8 years, someone who'd been at my wedding, who'd held Ethan as a baby, could sell me out like that. I started feeding Rachel false information as a test, told her I was thinking about moving to Portland, and 2 days later, Marcus's lawyer filed a motion citing my plans to relocate with the minor child. That's when I knew for sure. The humiliation of realizing I'd been completely alone this whole time, that my support system was rotten from the inside, made me feel like I was drowning with no lifeline. Every conversation I'd had with Rachel replayed in my mind, and I wondered what else she'd shared, what other secrets I'd handed my enemy. But the real knife to my heart was watching Ethan pull away from me, slowly at first, then more obviously as Marcus worked his poison. My 12-year-old son started making excuses not to spend time with me, started questioning everything I said, started repeating phrases that sounded exactly like his father. "Dad says you're trying to take his company," Ethan told me one night, his young face confused and angry. "Dad says you never really worked, that you just stayed home." The lies Marcus was feeding our son were destroying the one relationship I'd kill to protect, and the shamed feeling of being painted as the villain in my own child's eyes was unbearable. Marcus dangled Ethan like a weapon, threatening to fight for full custody, telling me I was an unfit mother who'd be lucky to get weekends. The family drama escalated when Eleanor started showing up at Ethan's school, positioning herself as the stable grandmother figure, while painting me as unstable and emotional. I'd see them whispering, Marcus and Eleanor and even Rachel, building this narrative that I was falling apart, that I couldn't handle reality. The shocking part was how easily people believed it, how quickly I went from respected community member to pitied, broken divorcee in everyone's eyes. Every night I'd lie awake terrified that I was losing my son, that Marcus's manipulation was working, that Ethan would choose his father's lies over my truth. The dignity I was trying so hard to maintain kept slipping through my fingers as I watched my relationship with Ethan deteriorate. He stopped hugging me, stopped saying I love you, started treating me like an inconvenience in his life. This wasn't just about revenge or payback anymore. This was about survival, about protecting the one pure thing in my life from being completely poisoned by his father's toxicity. I realized then that I needed to play smarter, not harder, because going head-to-head with Marcus wasn't working. I needed to protect Ethan's inheritance, his future, even if he couldn't see what I was doing right now. So I made a decision that would change everything, one that required me to swallow my pride and look defeated when inside I was planning something Marcus's arrogant brain could never anticipate. Here's the truth I've been holding back, the secret that changes everything you think you know about this story. 3 years before Marcus asked for that divorce, I found something in the company books that made my blood run cold. I was doing the quarterly reconciliation like always, and I noticed these weird patterns, transfers that didn't make sense, loans appearing out of nowhere, credit lines maxed out and then mysteriously paid down. At first I thought maybe I was reading it wrong, that I'd made some mistake in the spreadsheets. But the more I dug, the more shocking the reality became. Marcus's empire, the successful consulting firm everyone admired, the house with the perfect lawn, the luxury cars, it was all built on debt, a massive house of cards ready to collapse. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Business loans stacked on top of personal loans, second mortgages, lines of credit from 4 different banks, unpaid taxes going back years. The betrayal wasn't just personal anymore. Marcus had been lying to everyone, including his own clients and investors, projecting success while drowning in obligations he couldn't possibly pay. We weren't wealthy. We were leveraged to the absolute breaking point. I spent weeks verifying everything, cross-referencing statements, talking to an accountant friend in another city who helped me understand exactly how bad it was. The company owed nearly $2 million. The house had 3 liens against it, And the profit Marcus bragged about was actually just him shuffling money between accounts to create an illusion. My hands shook as I documented everything. Printed copies. Stored files in places Marcus would never think to look. The infidelity with Sienna suddenly made more sense. He needed a distraction. Needed everyone focused on the drama while his financial empire crumbled behind the scenes. Here's where my grandmother's voice came back to me. That wisdom she'd drilled into my head since I was 16. Always have your own money, sweetheart. Money that's only yours. I'd inherited some money when she passed, about $80,000, and I'd kept it separate in my own IRA that Marcus didn't even know existed. I'd also been quietly depositing small amounts from my freelance editing work, money Marcus dismissed as hobby cash, into that same protected account. When I discovered the debt situation, I immediately set up an irrevocable trust for Ethan, moving my inheritance and savings into it, where Marcus's creditors could never touch it. The justice of it all hit me like lightning. Marcus wanted everything in the divorce, and I was going to let him take it. Every asset he was fighting for was actually a liability, a ticking time bomb of debt and obligation. While he was busy humiliating me, backstabbing me, parading Sienna around and turning Ethan against me, I was protecting the only real assets we had. My separate money and our son's future. The payback wouldn't be me fighting him in court for half of a sinking ship. It would be watching him demand that ship, sign for that ship, and sail it straight to the bottom. I needed a lawyer who'd understand this strategy. Someone who could help me look defeated while actually orchestrating Marcus's downfall. That's when I found Jessica, a sharp-as-nails attorney who'd handled complex financial divorces and knew exactly how to play the game. "Let me get this straight," she said, looking at my documentation with growing amazement. "You want to give him everything?" I smiled for the first time in months and said, "Not give, let him take it. There's a difference." Jessica and I crafted the performance of a lifetime, and honestly, I deserved an Oscar for what came next. We drafted a settlement proposal that made me look desperate and defeated. I asked for just $50,000, my personal belongings, and shared custody of Ethan. That's it. No claim to the business, no fight for the house, no demand for half of anything Marcus considered his. When his lawyer received our proposal, I could practically hear Marcus laughing through the phone, that arrogant chuckle that said he'd won, that I was finally accepting my place as the woman he'd discarded. The betrayal I'd endured became my greatest weapon because Marcus's ego was so inflated he couldn't see the trap. He started telling people I'd finally come to my senses, that I'd realized I had no case and was taking whatever scraps he was willing to give me. Eleanor called to gloat, saying she was proud of me for not being difficult, like I was a child who'd finally learned to behave. The humiliation of playing this role, of letting them think they'd broken me, was almost unbearable. But I kept my grandmother's recipe box on my kitchen counter as a reminder of why I was doing this. Jessica was brilliant in the negotiations, playing up my emotional distress, even tearing up once when Marcus's lawyer pushed for me to take less. "My client just wants to move on," she'd say, her voice shaking just enough to sound genuine. "She's not interested in a long court battle. She just wants peace." And Marcus ate it up, every single word. He refused the financial audit we half-heartedly requested, waving it off like it was beneath him. "Everything's in order," he insisted, so confident in his lies that he couldn't imagine anyone seeing through them. The shocking part was watching Marcus rush the process, pushing for faster signatures, waiving waiting periods, all because Sienna was getting impatient. She wanted to move forward with their life, wanted to get married, wanted to redecorate that house completely without me lurking in the background. His new relationship became the pressure cooker that made him sloppy, made him skip steps, made him sign documents his lawyer probably told him to read more carefully. I couldn't believe how perfectly it was falling into place. His arrogance, his impatience, his absolute certainty that he'd outsmarted me. Marcus signed waiver after waiver, waiving his right to discovery, waiving financial disclosure requirements, waiving the audit, waiving everything that would have exposed what I already knew. "She's not asking for anything anyway," he told his lawyer, according to Jessica's sources. Why waste time on audits? Each signature was another nail in his coffin, another piece of rope he was gleefully wrapping around his own neck. The karma of watching someone destroy themselves while thinking they're winning. There's nothing quite like it. We set the final court date, and I played my role perfectly right up until the end. Sad, diminished, grateful for whatever Marcus would allow me to have. I even thanked Eleanor for helping me pack, let Rachel send me a fake apology text that I knew was just fishing for information. My self-worth took a beating during those months of pretending to be broken, but I held on to the truth like a lifeline. This wasn't defeat. This was strategy. And soon, very soon, Marcus would discover exactly what he'd been fighting so hard to win. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. That generic government building smell of old paper and floor polish. Marcus sat at his table looking like he'd already won the lottery. Sienna beside him squeezing his hand, both of them barely containing their smiles. Eleanor was in the gallery behind them, nodding approvingly like she was watching her son receive some prestigious award. I sat with Jessica, playing my part. Hands folded, eyes downcast. The picture of a defeated woman just trying to get through this final humiliation. The judge reviewed the settlement terms out loud, and I watched Marcus practically glow with satisfaction as each asset was listed. The house, the cars, the business, all the equipment, the client list, the intellectual property, everything going to Marcus while I walked away with my $50,000 and my personal items. His lawyer had this smug expression, like this was almost too easy, like I was the saddest case he'd ever seen. The betrayal I'd endured was painted all over that courtroom, everyone looking at me with pity or contempt, nobody seeing what was actually happening beneath the surface. Then the judge got to the addendum, and this is where everything changed. Mr. Harrison, the judge said, looking over his reading glasses. I see here that in accepting all marital assets, you're also accepting full responsibility for all marital debts, liabilities, and financial obligations associated with said assets. I watched Marcus's face, waiting for it. His lawyer leaned over, scanning the document quickly, and that's when he whispered those 5 words that made my entire year of hell worth it. You signed without reading this. The truth hit Marcus like a freight train, and I couldn't believe how satisfying it was to watch his face drain of color. What debts? He sputtered, looking between his lawyer and the judge. What are you talking about? The business is profitable. The house is. But the judge cut him off, explaining that he'd waived his right to financial discovery, that he'd signed multiple acknowledgments that he was accepting assets as is, with all associated obligations. Jessica calmly produced our documentation, copies of loan agreements, tax liens, credit statements, all the proof of the massive debt bomb Marcus had been hiding. The shocking moment came when the numbers were read aloud. $1.9 million in business debt, $300,000 in unpaid taxes, liens on the house totaling $400,000, plus various credit lines and personal loans. The gallery gasped. Sienna's hand dropped from Marcus's like he'd suddenly caught fire, and Eleanor made this strangled sound from the back row. "This is fraud!" Marcus shouted, standing up so fast his chair fell backward. "She knew about this. She's been planning this. But the judge shut him down hard, reminding him that he'd refused the audit, waived disclosure, and signed every document acknowledging he understood what he was taking. Marcus's lawyer tried to argue, scrambling for any foothold. But it was over. The judge validated the agreement. Marcus got everything he wanted, and everything he wanted was about to bury him. I walked out of that courtroom with my dignity intact, my son's future protected, and the kind of revenge that doesn't just hurt, it educates. The payback wasn't me taking anything from Marcus. It was him taking everything from himself while I stood back and watched. Justice had never tasted so sweet, and the look on his face as reality crashed down. That image is burned into my memory forever, right next to the memory of my grandmother telling me to always have my own money. The aftermath was faster and more brutal than even I'd imagined, like watching a building collapse in slow motion once that first support beam gives way. Sienna was gone within 48 hours. I heard through the grapevine that she'd moved out the same night as the court hearing, didn't even pack properly, just threw stuff in her car and disappeared. Marcus called her crying, begging, making promises he couldn't keep. But she wasn't stupid enough to stick around for the financial carnage she'd seen coming. The betrayal Marcus felt when his trophy girlfriend abandoned him was poetic. He finally understood what it felt like to be treated as disposable. The business started hemorrhaging within weeks because clients don't stick around when they find out the company's drowning in debt and legal issues. Marcus couldn't make payroll, couldn't cover basic expenses, and word spreads fast in our industry. The humiliation he'd put me through came back tenfold as former colleagues and clients distanced themselves, as his reputation crumbled from successful entrepreneur to financial disaster. I couldn't believe how quickly everything fell apart once the facade cracked. Turns out, when you build an empire on lies and debt, it doesn't take much to bring the whole thing down. The house went on the market immediately because Marcus had no choice. But here's the karma of it all. Nobody wanted to buy a property with 3 liens and a desperate seller. It sat there month after month, price dropping, Marcus getting more frantic, the bills piling up faster than he could shuffle them. He tried calling me twice. Both times I let it go to voicemail. Both times he was either begging or threatening, his voice unrecognizable from the confident man who'd kicked me out months before. The justice of him living in that house alone, surrounded by Sienna's gray paint and the ghost of his arrogance, was almost too perfect. Rachel tried reaching out with this pathetic apology text about how she got caught up in Marcus's manipulation and never meant to hurt me. I blocked her number without responding, because some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness, don't deserve closure. She lost her meal ticket when Marcus went broke and suddenly wanted to be friends again. Shocking how that works. I heard later she'd been getting money from Marcus for the information she fed him, which somehow made it worse, and also explained why she'd sold me out so easily. Eleanor was the most surprising fall because she'd tied her whole identity to Marcus's success, bragging about her successful son to everyone who'd listen. When the truth came out, when people realized the empire was fake, she became a joke in her social circles. She tried using Ethan to get back into my good graces, showing up at his school with gifts and sob stories. But my son had seen enough by then. Ethan came home one day and told me, "Grandma keeps saying bad things about you. But Dad lied about everything, didn't he? The reclaiming of my relationship with my son, watching him see through the manipulation, that was worth more than any financial revenge. I used my $50,000 and my protected savings to start fresh, got a small but perfect apartment, enrolled in some professional development courses, started freelancing seriously, and building my own client base. My self-worth came back gradually, like learning to breathe again after being underwater too long. Ethan started staying with me more, choosing my calm space over Marcus's chaos. And one night he hugged me tight and whispered, "I'm sorry I believed him, Mom." I held my son and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace, real peace, the kind that comes from knowing you protected what mattered most and let karma handle the rest. So that's my story, and I'm standing here today completely free, completely at peace, and honestly, completely vindicated. But now I want to hear from you, because I know I'm not the only one who's been through something like this. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? Have you ever had that moment where you realized the person destroying you was actually destroying themselves? Drop a comment below and tell me your story. I read every single one. And trust me, your experience matters more than you know. And here's what I'm really curious about. If you were in my position, would you have done the same thing? Or would you have handled it differently? Do you think revenge is ever justified? Or should we always take the high road even when we're being backstabbed? I want to know what you would have done with those garbage bags, with that smugness, with watching your own child being turned against you. Share your thoughts, your anger, your own moments of payback. This is a safe space for real talk about the messy, complicated truth of family betrayal and justice. If this story resonated with you, if it made you feel something or think about your own situation differently, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I've got more stories coming that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about dignity, self-worth, and how far people will go when pushed to their absolute limit. These aren't your typical feel-good stories. They're raw, they're real, and they're the kind of insights you won't find in surface-level content. So subscribe, stay connected, and let's keep this conversation going, because your story, your voice, your truth, it all matters. I'll see you in the next one.